And we're live. Here we go. And welcome back to TWiP. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Joining me this week to discuss the world of photography and more, Mr. Dan Ablin and my good friend, Mr. Martin Bailey. Hey, guys. How you doing?
Hey, Frederick.
Hey, doing great, thank you.
It was uneventful.
All right. Dan, let's start with you. I don't think you've been on the show in quite a while. What's going on in the world of photography in the Chicagoland area?
We've been getting busy doing high school seniors. I just finished a street photography workshop last weekend with the one and only Valerie Jardine.
Oh, my good friend. I'm going to Paris with her in a couple weeks.
I heard. I wasn't invited, but that's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you're not cool enough. I'm sorry.
I guess not. So then I've got the Out of Chicago conference I'm speaking at in Chicago, June 28th. So everybody can check that out. There's still spots open, outofchicago.com. And doing that, plus then our normal 3D animation work and marketing videos and all that good stuff. Just
you were always so busy. I mean, it's an inspiration because, like, over the past year or so, you've moved from studio to studio, and you're revamping your business, doing lynda.com courses, and more and more and more. Like, where do you find time to like hang with the family and just do that kind of stuff?
You got to make time. Like tonight, we went out for a little sushi all together, and came back here to the studio, and go home and work a little more. Just catch up online. They're pretty good about it. So
yeah.
But there's our websites. There's our 3D Garage training, 3dgarage.com. We've got some new training videos coming up. So you got to stay current. But we're not that busy during the winter months. Yeah. Now probably April started getting busy with seniors and families and business headshots and some big 3D projects. And hey, just got to keep going.
Yeah. So, well, busy is better than sitting waiting for the phone to ring, right?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, many times. So.
All right. Well, hey, welcome back to This Week in Photo. It's always good to have you on. All right, let's move on to Mr. Martin Bailey. Martin, what's going on in Tokyo?
Oh, not a lot. We've Tokyo itself. I don't know. I haven't seen outside for a couple of weeks. I've been stuck into the computer and trying to catch up on a lot of tasks. But everything's good. I'm rearing up for got a weekend workshop here in my humble studio this weekend, and which I'm looking forward to. And everything's good.
What's the weekend workshop? What's that about? You've got an ebook out on printing and that sort of thing. Are you focusing on that?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, when we met a couple of years ago over in San Francisco, I was there for the Pixels to Pigment tour that I was doing. I went around a number of countries, and there's been a lot of requests to do that again, and I haven't had time to set anything up, but I've been starting to think about doing one right here in my studio because I've got everything around me. It makes sense, but it's a little bit more expensive than the larger group. But it's I advertised it. We already had, at the time I started talking about it, 2 guys had come to me and with a definite maybe, and they jumped on board, and so we've got 4 guys coming over at the weekend. We're going to have a weekend of printing and digital workflow, and it should be a lot of fun.
So before we jump into the show, because there's a ton of stuff to talk about this week in photo. So when you do the Pixels to Pigment tour, what are you diving into? Because like I have a printer here. I've got an Epson printer. I can do file print and watch something pop out of it. What specifically are you talking about in this workshop?
Well, the idea of Pixels to Pigment is literally we start with the capture of the image, and if you want to, you can use the color checker passport from X-Rite to actually dial in your camera and make sure that that's all profiled. And then, and I don't do that all the time, but I do it quite a lot, especially when colors are going to be an issue. And then you have to shoot in such a way that, I mean, basically exposing to the right. It's something that a lot of people do, but I do it like all the time. And what happens by shooting to the right is that your images are generally brighter than they would be if you left it up to the camera. Now, one of the biggest problems with printing is that people's prints come out of the printer looking really dark, and if you do a lot of the stuff that we talk about in this workshop, including shooting to the right, and then you darken your monitor down to where it should be, then everything just drops out of the printer looking pretty much the same as it does on the screen. So it's really like it's an optimized digital workflow that is keyed in not just for color management, but we get into calibrating the screen and the printer, and so it's really an optimized digital workflow that gets you from A to Z without having to pull your hair out getting there.
Yeah, or pull your hair out or waste a bunch of paper and ink trying to get a decent print, right?
Neither of us can get a good hold on the hair, but I've just trimmed mine again. But
I know mine is both of ours is by design, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back to the show, Martin. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Before we move on to story number 1, I want to thank our first sponsor for this episode of This Week in Photo, and that's our friends over at FreshBooks.com. All right, guys. Last week, Getty, the guys behind the stock photos and all that, they introduced a new online service called Photos.com. And basically, this new site allows consumers to select curated photos that essentially they can have turned into art pieces and framed and hang on their walls. So instead of you buying a piece of art that you will then take, or a piece of photography that you will then take and put on your blog or in the newspaper article or whatever, you buy a piece of art that they will print up and frame and ship to you, and you can have it printed on canvas, aluminum, archival paper, birch, framed in birchwood, put on acrylic, whatever, and then you can hang it on your wall. And it looks like the prices vary depending on the image selected, but say choosing a random image from the wildlife collection brought up a price of $166 for a framed 20 by 20 of, say, a bulldog on archival paper. We'll put a link to this specific image that we looked up in this. So, Martin, let's start with you, since I know you are involved with stock photography with some other agencies. When you see services like this, as a professional photographer, does this make you think like, okay, this is the next wave, they're selling my stuff for me, I don't have to worry about it, my art is going to be hanging on the wall in cool people's houses? Or do you cringe as a photographer and say, okay, you know what, I don't want to condone this type of behavior for my particular pixels? What do you think?
I think there's a bit of both. There's certainly this sort of service is becoming more popular. 500px have started their prints. I'm working with a company. Actually, the last time I was on TWiP while you were away, Frederick, I think my pick of the week was Art Storefronts, and this is basically a website, a new service that is giving you go in there, you build your website, and then if you want to, you can have the Art Storefronts people fulfill the orders for you. So it's very similar to what Getty's putting together here. But I think that the thing that you need to be careful of is just the quality of the prints. And if you really need to, if you're going to hook up with a service like this and you care a hoot about what your images look like on people's walls, then my biggest bit of advice would be to buy just a small one. They're only like, I imagine you can get something for $80 or so for a relatively small print. Just spend a few dollars and actually get yourself a print made, because they don't always look as good as you'd hope. And
so you say like do a test print and order something small before you order a giant 30 by 40.
Well, not so. I mean, if you want to order a 30 by 40, if they've got a decent returns policy, then just go for it. But what I'm thinking of more is if you're going to tie up with a company like this and sell your work, you want to at least see what it looks like, even if you yourself don't intend to buy any.
Sure.
Because the quality is not always there, and even I'm sure that Getty are hooking up with a big name and it's all dialed in and everything, but it's difficult to get a decent print on a budget production line, and there's a lot of trade-offs that happen here. And I've seen these things, and they're good, but they're not great. And so really, my advice is based on how discerning a photographer you are. If you're happy to sell it and make a few bucks and not have it totally dialed in, then just go for it. If you really want to make sure that what's hanging on people's walls is a good representation of the quality that you represent as a photographer, then do a few tests.
Yeah. Dan Ablin, you're a studio photographer that, every day, I'm imagining day in, day out, you're in the studio or out and about around the Chicagoland area doing, portraits, senior portraits, weddings, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, when you see something like this, where, like, for example, Getty is saying, "Hey, we're gonna allow you to take a particular piece of imagery and make artwork and hang it on your wall," how does that make you feel? I mean, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'm struggling with where it lies.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with Martin too, because this is where people, the way the trend is now. I mean, we're one of the few full-time studios around, because people, just give me my images on disc and I'll go print them online, and the quality really isn't there. And that's why we try and always get people to the studio and they see the clarity and the quality and the color balance. Yeah. It's not muddy, and that's because we're working with a professional lab. We're color calibrated. We're making sure that everything's edited properly before it goes out. With this, that may or may not be done. So on that level, yeah, I agree with Martin. But at the same time, the other side of me is like, well, I could easily, in literally 20 minutes, set up a storefront for my own pictures. Like, here's one from, I actually pulled this. I don't know how well this will show. It's an alley in Italy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then down at the bottom, we're actually going to hang this in our bathroom. Let's see. Can you see the dog?
Yeah.
The dog is taking care of business right there, it looks like.
Yeah, this beautiful alley in Italy, and we're going to hang it in our bathroom because it's kind of funny because you barely see him, but he's just there at the bottom. And the shot behind me, up here, one of my Chicago shots, I've actually had a lot of people buy. That one that was in Rangefinder last year. So I can't get that kind of following if I set up my own site right away. So something like this, depending on how they pay and royalties and percentages and splits, might actually be a really great way to build your name, build your brand. And hey, if you're like the street photography workshop we did last week, all those people that are pretty much hobbyists, they can go out and sell all their photos. So in terms of being a studio photographer and using this, I don't think it's going to, change anything. It's more like the Tiny Prints and who are some of those others? Those card companies that every year we get more and more of those cards and less studio cards. Because people are using online digital. But this could be a really good outlet for some people. But again, I'd have to read the fine print and really see the quality too.
No, Martin, when like piggybacking on that, when you look at this and I don't know, you sort of look at this from I'm an artist standpoint, right? So does it make sense to I don't know, I'm searching for the right word, democratize your pixels, and put them out there for anyone to purchase? Or, like Dan was kind of alluding to, would it make more sense to, like, okay, I'm an artist and I'm gonna put these on my own little microsite, and if you want to buy my art, it's $3,000 or something like that. Should you go on that side and let Getty handle all the commerce and distribution for you, or should you bring it in house and be an artist?
No, I totally agree with what Dan's saying in that you've got to find an audience, and unless you've got a way to actually build an audience, then no amount of however beautiful your private little website is, it's not going to get eyeballs. So you've got to be able to drive people to the site. But if you were to get into something like this photos.com from Getty, then they've already got the eyeballs there. Obviously it's shared across many more people. Perhaps, I'm not sure. They're saying it's curated. I imagine it's going to be handpicked from the people that already have images in their collection. So you might need to. You might be competing against a lot more people, but it's better than having no eyeballs on your site.
Right.
If you've already got an audience, of course, then if you're doing something to build an audience and you have people coming visiting your site, it's much easier. But still, it's very difficult to get that kind of exposure in a website that you've got your own domain name and everything like that. I think they both work. I think that if you know that you've got a way of driving people to a site, go for a private one. And it probably, and like you were saying earlier, Frederick, you need to see the small print, because I doubt that it's exclusive. But you never know. If it's exclusive, then you've got to think about it a bit harder. If not, you can do both. There's nothing. The only thing stopping you from doing both is time.
And I'll put this last piece of this to both of you. So there are a bunch of solutions out there. Like we talked about before. There's 500pix.com or 500px.com, and others, SmugMug, etc., that allow you to essentially do this, right? So you could build your own gallery and put it out there and put your images in there and set your own prices and derive most of the revenue from that artwork. So, or a lot of it, save the 500pix or SmugMug, etc., their cut of it. Why wouldn't you do something like that where you maintain a modicum of control rather than handing the image and the pixels over to Getty and letting them run with it? So Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think, looking at the other sites which do, so many places that do this, they're just marketing this as wall art. Nobody's really done it. The other ones are saying we're a digital photo company. You could buy stock photos. These guys are kind of turning it around and saying, hey, we're selling this wall art. For people that are in it and that, don't want their images out there, that's something they really have to decide if they want to spread that image around.
Right.
On the other hand, I know plenty of people that are just so thrilled that somebody liked their photo, and then would even hang on the wall. They just give it away. They're thrilled with that. So, you got to remember, we're all into photography because we love it. It's a passion. It's a hobby. A lot of us, it's become a business. But I rarely find anybody that's in this just because they have to. There's always that end of it, and that's probably who it's speaking to those people that just want to get their images out there, and hey, if they can make $20 on it, great. First time when we opened our studio, not that I was paid for photography before, but once we did the studio 6 years ago, and I started really making portrait sales and realizing my images are hanging on people's walls and we're getting paid well for that, it's kind of enlightening. It's like, wow, somebody really likes this. So
yeah.
I think it's going to be an individual choice for a lot of people, and it's something I might even try. Give it a shot. And the funny thing is, I probably wouldn't put up like one of my most favorite images. I'd put something that might not be, I don't know, I would be too attached to. Because, and bottom line, we talked about this in many TWiP podcasts in the past. Once it's out there, it's out there. 500 pix and anywhere else. So.
Can't really pull it back. Martin, you have anything to add to that? From the standpoint of why not just throw it up on 500pix or SmugMug versus a Getty?
And from my perspective, they're pretty much the same. I don't see any major difference between what Getty's doing and what these other guys are doing. The pricing looks very very similar. So yeah, I mean, as far as that, not really. There's I don't think there's going to be much of a comparison there.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, TWiP listeners, I suggest you go check it out. We'll put a link to the photos.com, or you can just type in photos.com into your browser and check it out. You should.
That's one thing I was thinking, because they must have paid through the nose for that domain name.
Oh yeah, that was not cheap.
Photos.com. No.
I'm gonna hazard a guess and say 7 figures probably around for that domain.
I was thinking that at least 6, probably 7.
Yeah, so they've got a lot of making up to do just to break even on just the domain name purchase. All right, guys. Yeah, so definitely check it out. I'm gonna dive in there and poke around in there and see what's going on at photos.com. All right, story number 2. You know what? I got to tell you guys, I've gotten I think at least 5 to 10 emails from TWiP listeners, other co-hosts, and friends, etc., about this story. So essentially, and let me read this. So Bruce Clark, one of our show notes writers, wrote this. So he wrote in, Amazon, the online retail giant and makers of the Kindle, were recently awarded a patent for a common studio photography technique. the United States Postal or trademark, not postal, but the trademark office granted Amazon Technologies, or Amazon, a subsidiary of Amazon, so Amazon Technologies, which is a company of Amazon, they granted him the patent on the common studio photography method of photographing subjects on, wait for it, a seamless white background using a cyclorama. Now, the actual patent is pretty detailed, and it contains specific details regarding exact placement of lights, subjects, etc. But Amazon claims that this patent is novel in that prior art solutions required for retouching, post-processing, and green screen techniques to achieve a specific seamless white background are necessary regarding the sort of numbers and placement that they have in this patent. So, putting it to you guys, the panel on This Week in Photo, just breaking it down to the salt here. So Amazon basically says, we're patenting taking photos of things on a white background. Dan, you're first, because I know you probably frequently take photos of people or things on a white background.
Well, you know what?
Are you infringement? Or is Jeff Bezos going to come after you for doing your job now?
First of all, I never use white background. I personally can't stand it. I think it looks like it's dated and it's from Sears and JCPenney from all those years ago. So, no offense to the photographers that love the high key. I never liked it. That being said, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, are they really going to go after people that are doing this? I mean, there's some provisions in there, like one here is calling out a specific lighting placement and even the placement of a 21-inch raised platform 9 feet from the backdrop for the subject to stand on.
Right.
You know, there's some very specific things in there. But why they would do something like this is just beyond me.
I don't get it.
It's like, I mean, open up every photography book, and it's pretty much the same lighting, the same setup. And if you look at the little diagram, if you see that in the patent, there's a light behind the subject, lighting the white background, the light in front. I wonder if it's a joke.
Photography 101, studio photography 101. Like,
and the light placement's not really very good either, by the way. But it's I have no idea why they would do this. It's been used for 100 years, this technique.
I don't get it. I saw this. I thought it was a joke at first, and then you know it's real. It's in the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So, Martin, when you see this, I mean, like, what? Like, you know, obviously this is, you know, ludicrous. You know, but when you look at this from the standpoint of, okay, what are they trying to do? Like, is this a publicity stunt from Amazon? Is this a harbinger of something bigger coming down from Amazon? Like, what? I'm like racking my brain thinking, why would a multi-billion-dollar company like Amazon.com try to patent something as simple as a seamless, you know, high-key photography technique? And if they're doing this, is HDR next? Is multiple exposure next? Is, you know, what's next? You know, blurred backgrounds? Is this next?
I mean, I think that giving them, against my better judgment, giving them the benefit of the doubt, I think that it's probably more about the placement of the lights and all of that, but it is ridiculous.
But who cares? I mean, like, who cares? Like, what? Yeah. What? You know, I would think Amazon.com, their primary motivation is profit, right? They're a for-profit, publicly held company. So when I'm just looking at this, I'm like, okay, I'm not a stockholder, but if I were a stockholder looking at this, where did this increase my shareholder value?
Well, you know, I can't see them ever really trying to fight a case against, you know, someone's doing something very similar, millions of people every day doing something very similar. I can't see them ever actually trying to fight a case for this. So yeah, I mean, what's their motive? It's nothing special. It's, if they tried to fight it, the photography world would be up in arms. You know, maybe they don't care about that. They've got enough consumers keeping the money rolling in that maybe they don't care about that. But you know, I mean, photographers use Amazon a lot too. I use them all the time here in Japan. So
yeah, I don't get it. I'm still I'm waiting on the next shoe to drop. I'm like, okay, this will make this will make sense after this other thing happens. Okay, it'll all come into.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Right. There's something else, right, Dan? I mean, like, what's next? Why would you do this? Other than
maybe some device coming out.
I'm thinking, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking, okay, you know, there hasn't been a whole lot of controversy. You know, they won the whole one-click thing. You know, maybe maybe Amazon is like, you know, they've got a room full of lawyers that are like, you know what, we're bored. We don't have anything. We don't have anything to do. Let's start patenting stuff that we, you know, clearly have no business patenting.
Maybe somebody's sister started a little photography business and she's mad at her neighbor who's copying her, and so her relatives that are higher up at Amazon said, you know what, we'll take care of them.
Yeah.
And they patented the neighbor's technique, and now she can go to the neighbor and say, cease and desist.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but a higher level, Dan. Let's keep it on you. So, you know, looking at this from a different perspective, photography techniques like this, you know, photographing high key images, you know, portraits, products, etc., on a white background, which is the definition of high key, or low key, or, you know, any photographic technique, is that patentable? You know, is the idea of I mean, no, well, yeah, I mean, but, you know, just common sense wise, clearly the United States Patent and Trademark Office doesn't subscribe to the common sense ethos.
Well, technically, you know what? It very well could be, because I had a little discussion on Facebook the other day where I was saying how much I hate hair lights, because all it does is put this white, bright light on top of the head, and the typical three-point lighting, you know, I don't do that, and I haven't done it for years. So the lighting technique I use is very similar to what Pork DC uses. Vicky Toffer uses it, and it's kind of a little more fall-off type of light. You know, here's your subject, and your light's in front. You see there, okay? And the light just kind of falls off and wraps around. Yeah. And then one's in back. So you're literally lighting, you know, perpendicular to everything. Right. And, hey, why don't we go patent that? And
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Can you patent that? You know, I mean, based on what, I mean, it's prior art, right? So Amazon is establishing a precedent with being able to patent high-key lighting. Can you guys then take that technique and patent it and lock every other photographer on the planet out of being able to do that kind of photography?
Well, how much does it cost to do? How much does a patent cost? Let me find out.
I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, even if it's $2 over 20 million photographers, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Well, good luck enforcing it. That's the only thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. It's enforcing something like that. Even if the patent office accepts those and actually registers them, it's just ridiculous. It's almost like patenting walking or something like that. You know that.
Right.
We've been doing. We've been.
It's just funny. It's ridiculous. You know. I like I said at the beginning, I saw this and I thought it was a joke. You know. So. I'm wondering what happened. Like, is this just a breakdown of our, you know, trademark system? Was there an intern over there that clicked the wrong checkbox? You know, like,
or is it truly somebody that doesn't know any difference, that this really hasn't been around? You know, that thinks they haven't been around and they think this is something brand new and like, ooh, we should do it. I mean, maybe they just don't know any better and they do think it's something unique,
which is scary.
That's probably the case.
That's horrible. I mean, that that may be the case, and that sounds plausible. But if that's the case, it's really, really scary, right? Because that person will probably not understand the concept of HDR, and I could go in and patent HDR. After that,
I'm going to copyright bokeh.
Yeah, all that stuff. So, yeah,
no longer shoot at f1.8.
It's yeah, and as a matter of fact, I think I will just patent the numbers 1.8. So only I can use the numbers 1.8. You know,
and Nikon would pay you. Yeah, for every lens that they have to use it.
So scary, so scary. All right, guys, let's move on. I want to jump into the listener Q&A now. This is the segment of the show where we answer a question that has been at the top of one of our listeners' minds. And this week's question comes from Paul via our Google Plus community page. He says, as my photography grows, I find myself regularly reflecting and reviewing my work. Images that were great a few years ago are now a bit ho-hum. in my eyes. One of the key themes that comes up during this process is the perennial question, what makes a good photo? Often, at least for me, there are two competing elements. The aesthetics of the image versus the story the image is trying to convey. Obviously, a beautiful storytelling image is both and rare. I am, for this, he's aware that the story image isn't always aesthetically pleasing, and the beautiful image seems to sometimes lack cognitive depth. What are your thoughts or experiences on beauty or story? When can't you get both? Martin, so you've been around the world shooting, snow monkeys, icebergs, all that kind of stuff. What do you think of this story or this question from Paul? Beauty versus the story. Is it possible to combine both in a single image when you're out and about trying to capture art?
Well, I think that I'm not quite sure that I agree that something that is story, predominantly story can't be beautiful. Well, I don't think he's saying it can't be, but I think that, as the old adage, beauty is in the eye of the beholder and all of that. I think that there's a certain amount of, we've got to having a bit of an earthquake here in Tokyo.
Are you really? Wow, a live earthquake in a hangout. Great.
Only a little bit. It's probably far away. So we, So I'm just getting sidetracked myself there. So yeah. I'm thinking that the beauty of an image, even if it's something, it's predominantly story. It's not necessarily a typically beautiful image. Quite often, there's got a lot of beauty in there anyway. And I think that the way that you need to build the beauty in is just to be, even if you're still thinking of story, just make sure that you've still got your eye on the composition. Make sure that you're doing things that, and I'm not necessarily saying rule of thirds and stuff like that, although that's a good base to start with. Mm-hmm. But, just make sure that you're still placing the elements of the story in a pleasing part of the frame, and it's like Dan's photo with the dog taking a crap. I mean, that is I love that photo. You pan down and he's placed it right in the bottom corner. He's zoomed out a little bit to get all of the alley in there, and there's a dog taking a dump in the bottom, and that's brilliant. It adds so much to the image. And so, even if it's story and something that's not necessarily, it's a bodily function that we don't all associate with beauty, but I think the image is really beautiful. So, I think that it's more about making sure that you try not to just concentrate on story, and then you can make most stories beautiful, even if not in the typical sense.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. It's art, and art is always subjective. Dan, what about you? I mean, looking at this.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. That was very nice, and I absolutely agree. And it reminded me of one of the beginning scenes in Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, and he's talking about in this book, this textbook. He opens it up, and it's the Pritchard scale of how to understand poetry, what makes it great, and if he ranks this high on this scale and this far on this scale, it's truly great. And so he tells them this, and the kids are writing it down, and he goes, excrement, because they're trying to rate it in terms of scale. And as you were reading this about, well, if the aesthetic is this, it just reminded me of that, of trying to put it on some scale, and it's not. A photograph or a movie, you read the critics about certain movies, and they're always wrong, right? Because it's not just, well, the writing's bad, there's no protagonist. The bottom line is how it makes you feel. A photograph, a movie, a book, and everything's going to speak to somebody differently than somebody else. Technically, obviously, you want, rule of thirds and things like that, of course, help. But I think people worry too much about those type of things today, and out of focus and grain and noise. Because when I was growing up in the 80s, and all the pictures in the 70s I studied, and before that, things are blurred. All those rock and roll photos and the Rolling Stones and everything, they're grainy, but there's, like you said, there's such a story in there, and you look and you just watch and you see what's going on. And I think people worry too much about, well, if I line this up in thirds and now the color here, and I'll put the light in with Photoshop.
Technical perfection, right?
Just stop. just look. And that's when we were in school. We had to shoot 36 pictures of one thing, of my grumpy mug. Or he would do 2 rolls of that mug or that chair, and it forces you just how to look and see things from a different perspective. So, I think just don't. I would tell Paul, stop thinking about it. Just go shoot. Just look at other people's work, and just when you see it, just your instincts will kick in, and you'll get that photograph.
Yeah.
Don't think about it too much.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things you said that resonated with me is like, don't necessarily strive for technical perfection all the time, right? I mean, that's
maybe a landscape. Now, of course it depends. Like, but like street photography and portraits, it's kind of in between there. Your instinct and trying to get that timing right. But landscapes, things like that, that's a different story. But yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I think it depends. It really depends on what even within landscapes. It's like one of the things that we do on my workshops is shake the camera around. We actually move the camera as we're doing it. And a few years ago, that would have seemed pretty strange. Now it's becoming much more popular. And David Duchemin just released a new ebook on the subject of actually moving the camera around while you're or creating this stuff intentionally. So I think that even that. Technical, I agree with what Dan's saying. That it's not about the technique, a technically perfect image, but I think it can be across any genre, really. You can make beauty of pretty much anything.
Right.
And I think once you're learning to see, worry about that.
Yeah.
Then when you've got it, and then shake the camera, like on the street photography workshop with Valerie last week. There's these kids skateboarding, and we're panning the camera and we're getting blurred shots, and people are like, "Well, my subject's still a little blurred." Like, that's okay. It sets the motion and the tone. So yeah, shake things up.
Love it. All right, I think we hit that question, guys. Before we jump into the picks of the week, I want to thank our last sponsor for this episode of TWiP, and that's our good friends over at Squarespace.com. All right, guys, let's jump into the Picks of the Week segment. Remember, your pick can be anything as long as it's somehow related to photography. Dan Ablin, I'm going to let you go first. What is your pick of the week?
Mirrorless cameras.
That's a little broad, but okay.
All right, I don't use this thing, but it actually looked really cool, and I'm thinking about getting it. It's called the Look Lock. The Look Lock. Okay. Yeah, coolthings.com. And what it does, it goes to your hot shoe, and it's a little like tripod arm, and you can mount your phone right over your lens. So you can put a picture or a movie. So if you're shooting little kids, they're looking right in the lens. Oh, you can't see here. Sorry. They're looking right in the lens. It mounts it right over, and it's just a little arm that holds your phone. And you can get people's attention. You can also, what I was thinking, if you've got a camera that streams wirelessly or you're tethered, you can actually have a live view of what they're seeing. Nice. Possibly use it as a teleprompter. There's a lot of possibilities for it. So coolthings.com, the Look Lock.
All right, cool. That's a perfect pick of the week. How much does that cost?
$100.
Almost
$79.
Okay, that's better. Yeah. You gotta be significantly under $100 for it to be perfect.
Yeah, and I'm sure, of course, you can turn it mounted the other way so that if you're shooting low, and again, you get your camera kind of tethered to it, you can use it as an extended viewfinder. If you can get your camera, going to it.
Awesome.
So
cool. All right. Well, thank you for that pick of the week.
You're welcome.
All right, Martin Bailey coming to us live from Tokyo. What is your pick of the week?
You know what? It's a little bit restricted to a small section of the audience, but I doubt it's that small. But if you develop your website with WordPress, and I mean, I'm totally in on the Squarespace thing, so I don't want to rain on anyone's fireworks here. And I think that it's a great solution for the majority of people. But if you're one of the people that actually still develops your website with WordSpace, which is how I do my main website, WordPress, then yesterday, I mean, a plugin that I wanted to make my pick of the week saved my life. Not literally, but it was I'd changed themes, and this, I mean, this is really one of the reasons why Squarespace is so great, because you don't have to worry about this stuff. But I changed themes, and there was a conflict with one of my plugins. It was the Fancy Box plugin. My theme also used it, and the way it's been implemented is basically breaks the website. It breaks not only Fancy Box, but it breaks the website itself when I had both working. So I went away and tried to find an alternative, and I found a great Lightbox style plugin called Responsive Lightbox. And I provided a link, but Responsive Lightbox, basically it incorporates a whole number of Lightbox options, and different customizations for each, and it's just really good. It's obviously it's free, so it's not one of those things that, like, normally when I'm mentioning things that are going to cost people a couple of grand, it's free. So if you are working with WordPress and you want your images to pop up in the page and look nice on the screen, then check out Responsive Lightbox. It's pretty cool. It's got a lot of great options.
Excellent. And how much? You said that's free?
It's free. It's I've only been using it for a day, but literally it saved my life yesterday evening. But they might have a pro version. I'm not sure. But so far, looking in the plugin, they just say that I can't even see a way to give them a donation. They're saying, if you like it, give us a good review. So I'm going to be off doing that this afternoon. But I don't even think that they're taking donations at the moment. But if they are, I'll throw them a few dollars, probably a few scores of dollars, because they've really saved me a lot of time this week.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cool, awesome. Thank you, Martin. That was another perfect pick of the week.
Thank you.
All right, so my pick of the week is continuing on Martin's WordPress theme, is a theme or a theme company that makes awesome WordPress themes for photographers, magazine sites, etc. And it's a company called ElegantThemes.com. You guys may have heard of it. Elegant Themes.
For about 4 or 5 years at least.
Yeah, they're awesome. So ElegantThemes.com, they make the themes that power, FrederickVan.com, MediaBytes.com, ThisWeekinPhoto.com are all powered from software that came from ElegantThemes.com. So definitely check them out. I've been like you, Dan. I've been using them for several years now, and have been surprised every release that they do, that they continue to push the envelope forward in terms of quality and features and all sorts of things in your WordPress theme. So if you're using WordPress as your CMS or content management system of choice, definitely just go take a browse through some of the things that they have going on that site. It's pretty interesting over there. So we've been talking a lot about WordPress and the responsive Lightbox and Elegant Themes, but that's not to say that we are sponsored by Squarespace. So a lot of people say, yeah, you're talking about all these WordPress things. What about Squarespace? So Squarespace is an awesome sort of self-contained platform for people that just, like we said in the intro, you want to dive in and you want the path of least resistance. You want an awesome website without getting into the nuts and bolts of building your website. You don't care about CSS. You don't care about all these other sort of acronyms. You just want an awesome website. You want commerce. You want, you want it to be responsive, all that stuff. Squarespace does that out of the box for you. If you're more of a geek, you like twiddling around with the levers and knobs and all that stuff, or you want to go in and install plugins to do specific niche type things, then WordPress is probably, an option for you. So in either case, both options are out there, and you can look at both of them and make your choice. So anyway, guys, that brings us up to the end of another fantastic episode of This Week in Photo. I want to thank our sponsors for this episode. That's our friends over at FreshBooks and Squarespace. Dan Ablin, where can people go to keep up with you online?
They can go. Well, just get me on Twitter. I want to increase my Twitter count. So everybody has to start following me at danablin.com. But then for all the other sites, about that me /Dan Ablin. And it'll link to all the other ones, which are 2 Squarespace sites and 1 WordPress site.
Excellent. Look at you splitting the difference there. I love it. Awesome. All right. And Martin Bailey, what about you? Where can people go to keep up with you?
Everything's at martinbaileyphotography.com. Like I say, I've just switched themes, so I'm tweaking it a little bit at the moment, but it's actually got a little bit simpler. Everything's in the menu now, rather than having it all right there on the front page, but it's all still there at martinbaileyphotography.com.
Excellent. Keeping it all in one place. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right, guys. And listeners, if you want to keep up with This Week in Photo, you can check us out, of course, at thisweekinphoto.com. Or if you want to touch base with me personally, Frederick Van Johnson, you can find me at frederickvan.com. And with that, it is time to take that lens cap off.